"It woman that old Siberian, who is evidently his mother," said the deh baschi. At this remark, Michael's heart beat violently. "Yes," answered the pendja baschi, "she stuck to it well that the pretended merchant was not her son, but it was too late. Colonel Ogareff was not to be taken in, and, as he said, he will know how to make the old witch speak when the time comes." These words were so many dagger thrusts for Michael. He was known to be a courier of the Czar. A detachment of horsemen on his track could not fail to cut him off. And, worst of all, his mother was in the hands of the Tartars, and the cruel Ogareff had undertaken to make her speak when he wished. Michael well knew that the brave Siberian would sacrifice her life for him. He had fancied that he could not hate Ivan Ogareff more, yet a fresh tide of hate now rose in his heart. The wretch who had betrayed his country now threatened to torture his mother. The conversation between the two officers continued, and Michael understood that an engagement was imminent in the neighborhood of Kolyvan between the Muscovite troops coming from the north and the Tartars. A small Russian force of 2000 men, reported to have reached the lower course of the Obi, were advancing by forced marches towards Tomsk. If such was the case, this force, which would soon find itself engaged with the main body of Feofar Khan's army, would be inevitably overwhelmed, and the Irkutsk road would be in the entire possession of the invaders. As to himself, Michael learnt, by some words from the pendja baschi, that a price was set on his head, and that orders had been given to take him, dead or alive. It was necessary, therefore, to get the start of the Usbeck horsemen on the Irkutsk road, and put the Obi between himself and them. But to do that, he must escape before the camp was broken up. His determination taken, Michael prepared to execute it. Indeed, the halt would not be prolonged, and the pendja baschi did not intend to give his men more than an hour's rest, although their horses could not have been changed for fresh ones since Omsk, and must be as much fatigued as that of Michael Strogoff. There was not a moment to lose. It was within an hour of morning. It was needful to profit by the darkness to leave the little wood and dash along the road, but although night favored it, the success of such a flight appeared to be almost impossible. Not wishing to do anything at random, Michael took time for reflection, carefully weighing the chances so as to take the best. From the situation of the place the result was this, that he could not escape through the back of the wood, the stream which bordered it being not only deep, but very wide and muddy. Beneath this thick water was a slimy bog, on which the foot could not rest. There was only one way open, the high road. To endeavor to reach it by creeping round the edge of the wood, without attracting attention, and then to gallop at headlong speed, required all the remaining strength and energy of his noble steed. Too probably it would fall dead on reaching the banks of the Obi, when, either by boat or by swimming, he must cross this important river. This was what Michael had before him. His energy and courage increased in sight of danger. His life, his mission, his country, perhaps the safety of his mother, were at stake. He could not hesitate. There was not a moment to be lost. Already there was a slight movement among the men of the detachment. A few horsemen were strolling up and down the road in front of the wood. The rest were still lying at the foot of the trees, but their horses were gradually penetrating towards the center of the wood. Michael had at first thought of seizing one of these horses, but he recollected that, of course, they would be as fatigued as his own. It was better to trust to his own brave steed, which had already rendered him such important service. The good animal, hidden behind a thicket, had escaped the sight of the Usbeks. They, besides, had not penetrated so far into the wood. Michael crawled up to his horse through the grass, and found him lying down. He patted and spoke gently to him, and managed to raise him without noise. Fortunately the torches were entirely consumed, and now went out, the darkness being still profound under shelter of the larches. After replacing the bit, Michael looked to his girths and stirrups, and began to lead his horse quietly away. The intelligent animal followed his master without even making the least neigh. A few Usbeck horses raised their heads, and began to wander towards the edge of the wood. Michael held his revolver in his hand, ready to blow out the brains of the first Tartar who should approach him, but happily the alarm was not given, and he was able to gain the angle made by the wood where it joined the road. To avoid being seen, Michael's intention was not to mount until after turning a corner some 200 feet from the wood. Unfortunately, just at the moment that he was issuing from the wood, an Usbek's horse, scenting him, neighed and began to trot along the road. His master ran to catch him, and seeing a shadowy form moving in the dim light, "Look out!" he shouted. At the cry, all the men of the bivouac jumped up and ran to seize their horses. Michael leaped on his steed and galloped away. The two officers of the detachment urged on their men to follow. Michael heard a report, and felt a ball pass through his tunic. Without turning his head, without replying, he spurred on, and clearing the brushwood with a tremendous bound, he galloped at full speed toward the Obi. The Usbek's horses being unsaddled gave him a small start, but in less than 2 minutes he heard the tramp of several horses gradually gaining on him. Day was now beginning to break, and objects at some distance were becoming visible. Michael turned his head, and perceived a horseman rapidly approaching him. It was the deh baschi. Being better mounted, this officer had distanced his detachment. Without drawing rein, Michael extended his revolver and took a moment's aim. The Usbek officer, hit in the breast, rolled on the ground. But the other horsemen followed him closely, and without waiting to assist the deh baschi, exciting each other by their shouts, digging their spurs into their horses' sides, they gradually diminished the distance between themselves and Michael. For half an hour only was the latter able to keep out of range of the Tartars, but he well knew that his horse was becoming weaker, and dreaded every instant that he would stumble, never to rise again. It was now light, although the sun had not yet risen above the horizon. 2 versts distant could be seen a pale line bordered by a few trees. This was the Obi, which flows from the southwest to the northeast, the surface almost level with the ground, its bed being but the steppe itself. Several times shots were fired at Michael, but without hitting him, and several times too he discharged his revolver on those of the soldiers who pressed him too closely. Each time an Usbek rolled on the ground, midst cries of rage from his companions. But this pursuit could only terminate to Michael's disadvantage. His horse was almost exhausted. He managed to reach the bank of the river. The Usbek detachment was now not more than 50 paces behind him. The Obi was deserted, not a boat of any description which could take him over the water. "Courage, my brave horse!" cried Michael. "Come, a last effort!" and he plunged into the river, which here was half a verst in width. It would have been difficult to stand against the current; indeed, Michael's horse could get no footing. He must therefore swim across the river, although it was rapid as a torrent. Even to attempt it showed Michael's marvelous courage. The soldiers reached the bank but hesitated to plunge in. The pendja baschi seized his musket and took aim at Michael, whom he could see in the middle of the stream. The shot was fired, and Michael's horse, struck in the side, was borne away by the current. His master, speedily disentangling himself from his stirrups, struck out boldly for the shore. In the midst of a hailstorm of balls he managed to reach the opposite side, and disappeared in the rushes. End of Book 1, Chapter 16.